Make sure to like the video, subscribe and press the bell icon. JavaScript Tic Tac Toe game. Tic Tac Toe, which origin can be traced back to ancient Egypt from around 1300 BC, is a two-player turn-based game, played on a 3x3 grid with X and O marks. The player who manages to get their marks placed on the grid in a row, column, or diagonal first, wins the game. In this tutorial, we will take a look at how you can recreate it in JavaScript. At the end of the tutorial, you will also find the link to the full code. Without further ado, let's jump into it. Let's start by setting up the project. Create a new folder for the project and add an index.html file with the following markup. This will be the whole markup that is required for the entire game. Each cell on the board will be represented by a div. They will also have a data value attribute that we can later use in our JavaScript file to know which cell has been clicked in each turn. You may have also noticed that we are linking a style sheet and a script in the head, so make sure you add these next to your index.html file. We will also need an element for the game over text and a restart button that we can use to reset the game. We can leave the .game over text element empty, as we will use JavaScript to give it a value. It can have three possible states. Draw. X wins. O wins. Styling the board. That's all we need for the markup. Now let's have a look at the CSS, so we can actually have something that resembles a board. To start off, add the following rules to your empty styles.css to center the board and give it a border. We are using a CSS grid to create a 3x3 layout. Note that we also need to do a transform to dead center the board on the screen. This is so far not quite what we want, as we don't need borders around the board, only between cells, to get the classic grid layout of Tic Tac Toe. To remove the unnecessary borders, we can use nth-child pseudo-selectors to target the cells on each side, and remove the correct border. The formula in the parentheses represents the list of elements we want to target. The n can be a number, the index, or it can be a keyword, like even or odd, or a formula, like in the code example above. As counting is started from 0, the first formula will select the first three grid cell elements. n plus 3 gets the first three elements. 3n plus 1 gets the cells on the left. 3n plus 3 gets the cells on the right. Nth last of type, n plus 3 gets the last three elements. The same formula is used as for the first one, but this time, the nth last of type selector can be used to start the count from the end and get the last three elements instead of the first three. To show X and O inside the cells, we are also going to use CSS. This time, we use after and before pseudo elements. Lastly, we need to style the game over text. Just as for the board itself, we want the text to be displayed in the center of the screen. To achieve it, expand your styles.css file with the following rules. We also apply some other style for buttons and etc. That's all in the style.css. Now let's jump to the JavaScript file. Let's open the game.js. Now let's focus our attention on actually creating the game itself. We have the board, we have it styled, let's add the logic, which will fit in less than 100 lines of code. First, we want to define an object for storing the state of our game. XTurn, a flag to switch between turns. XState, the state of X, represented with an array of strings. OState, the state of Y, represented in the same way. Winning states, the possible combinations to win the game. How did we get the possible combinations? Remember, we indexed the cells with data value attributes. Based on those values, we can list the possible winning states here. We will match this against XState and OState later on to see who is winning the game. Adding click events to cells. To start off interacting with cells, we will need to add a new click event listener. Under your game object, add the following. We will define most of the game's logic inside this callback. Note that we have added the event listener on the document, rather than on individual cells, as we will delegate the event, so we can have a single event listener. Because of this, we will need to check whether the user clicked on a cell or not. For this, we can use classes to decide if the click event was triggered on the right element. We also want to check if the cell is disabled. If it is, that means we already have a mark in the cell, in which case, we want to do nothing. Essentially, not allow the user to place another mark into the cell. Inside the if, we first want to update the state of the cell and then switch turns. Luckily, we already have all the necessary classes and attributes for this, so we can add the following. First, we need to get the value of the cell from its data attribute so we can update the state with its value. We can use the xTurn flag to decide if it's the turn of X or O and push the cell's value into the state accordingly. We also want to add two classes for the cell, one for .disabled and one for .x or .o, based on the turn. Lastly, we can set the flag to its opposite. That's all we really need to start adding marks into the cells. The rest of the code will be needed for checking draws and wins. Check for draws. First, let's check for draws, as that only requires 4 lines of code. Each time we add a mark to a cell, we disable it. This means that if all cells are disabled, then it's a draw. We can achieve this with a simple selector. If there are no .grid cells without .disabled classes, then we can show the game over text. Check for wins. Checking for wins is a little bit trickier but nothing too complex. To check for wins, we want to loop through the possible winning states and compare the state of X and O to each winning state to see if there is a match. In order to do that, we first need to loop through winning states with a dot for each, and then we can use .every to see if X state and O state includes all of the values that are required for a win. If they are, we can disable all cells and show the game over screen, this time, with a winning text. Restarting the game. All we need now is the restarting functionality, so we can play a new round. Under the current click event listener, add a new click event listener on the .restart button. The job of this callback will be to remove the .visible class from the .gameover element, and remove all unnecessary classes from the cells as well. Lastly, we can reset the state too, and set everything back to its original value. Summary. And that's how you recreate Tic Tac Toe in vanilla JavaScript. I hope you learned much about basic game development in JavaScript, and you have found the explanation about the nth child selectors useful too. If you would like to take your game development skills to the next level, but still stay with JavaScript, I recommend checking my other tutorials. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video, subscribe and press the bell icon.